The scream that tore through Red Canyon that June morning in 1882 sent every bird fleeing from the cottonwoods. But there was no one around to hear it except the woman herself, and she knew with cold certainty that she might die alone in this God-forsaken stretch of Utah wilderness. Katherine Grace had been collecting wildflowers along the narrow trail when the earth simply gave way beneath her feet, sending her tumbling down the rocky slope in a cascade of dust and stone that seemed to have no end. She landed hard against an outcropping. The wind knocked from her lungs, and before she could even process what had happened, the entire cliff face above her gave a deep, terrible groan and came thundering down. The impact when the first boulder struck was like being hit by a locomotive. Katherine felt her left leg crumple beneath the weight, felt the sickening crack of bone, and then there was nothing but pain and the continued roar of falling rock. She tried to crawl, tried to drag herself away, but more stones pinned her other leg, then her waist, until she could barely draw breath. When the dust finally settled and the last pebbles stopped their rattling descent, Katherine found herself trapped beneath what must have been half a ton of rock, unable to move anything below her ribs. The pain was extraordinary. It radiated up from her crushed legs in waves that made her vision go white at the edges. She tried to scream again, but could only manage a strangled gasp, her lungs compressed by the weight pressing down on her chest. The morning sun beat down mercilessly, and Katherine realized with growing horror that she had told no one where she was going. She had left Ogden before dawn, riding out alone because she had wanted solitude, wanted to clear her head after another argument with her father about her future, about marriage, about becoming a proper lady instead of gallivanting around the countryside like some wild thing. Now she would die for that independence. Die alone and unmissed until her father sent someone looking, and by then the vultures would have found her. The thought made her want to weep, but she forced the tears back. Katherine Grace had never been one to surrender easily. At 22 years old, she had defied every expectation placed upon her, had refused 3 marriage proposals from suitable men, had learned to shoot and ride as well as any man in the territory. She would not give up now, even if the situation seemed hopeless. She craned her neck, trying to assess the damage. Her right leg was completely buried beneath a massive boulder that must have weighed 300 pounds at least. Her left leg was pinned by dozens of smaller rocks, and a flat slab of sandstone lay across her hips and lower abdomen. She could wiggle her fingers and move her arms freely, but when she tried to push at the stones, they would not budge even a fraction of an inch. Her beautiful yellow dress, the one she had sewn herself with tiny flowers embroidered along the hem, was torn and bloody. Her bonnet had been ripped away in the fall, and her dark hair hung loose around her face, matted with dust and sweat. The sun climbed higher. Katherine's throat grew parched, and she remembered with bitter irony that her canteen was still attached to her saddle. Her horse, a gentle mare named Sweetpea, had bolted at the first rumble of the Rockslide and was probably halfway back to Ogden by now. Maybe someone would see the riderless horse and come looking. Maybe. She tried calling for help, but her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. The weight on her chest made it impossible to draw a deep enough breath to shout. She tried again and again until her throat was raw, but the canyon swallowed her feeble cries without echo. Red Canyon was beautiful but remote, carved by ancient waters through rust-colored stone, dotted with juniper and sage. People came through here occasionally, but the main trail was a half-mile to the north. Katherine had wandered off the path in search of the wild columbines that grew in the shaded crevices. Hours passed. The pain in her legs had settled into a constant, screaming agony that never diminished. Katherine drifted in and out of consciousness, dreaming feverishly of water, of her mother who had died when she was 12, of cool sheets and soft beds. When she woke, the sun was past its zenith, angling westward, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. She tried to moisten them with her tongue but had no saliva left. This was how she would die, she thought with strange clarity, crushed and pinned and slowly baking under the Utah sun. Her father would be devastated. For all their arguments, he loved her fiercely, had raised her alone after her mother's death, had indulged her wild streak even when the town gossips clucked their tongues. He would blame himself for not reining her in, for letting her ride out alone. The thought of his grief hurt worse than her shattered legs. She was crying now, silent tears that carved tracks through the dust on her face. She thought of all the things she would never do, never see. She had wanted to travel, to see San Francisco and maybe even New York. She had wanted to fall in love, despite her rejections of the local suitors. None of them had made her heart race, had made her feel truly alive. She had been waiting for something more, something real and true and overwhelming. Now she would die without ever knowing what that felt like. The sun was beginning its descent toward the canyon rim when she heard it. The sound of hoofbeats, distant but distinct, echoing off the stone walls. Katherine's heart surged with hope so intense it was painful. She tried to call out but managed only a faint croak. The hoofbeats were growing louder, closer. Someone was coming down the canyon. She had to make them hear her. With every ounce of strength she possessed, Katherine sucked in as much air as her compressed lungs could hold and screamed. It came out thin and broken, but it was louder than before. She screamed again and again until black spots danced across her vision and she thought she might pass out. Then she heard the hoofbeats stop, heard a man's voice, distant and questioning. "Hello? Someone there? Help," Katherine cried, her voice cracking. "Please help me." The sound of boots on stone, running now. And then a man appeared at the top of the slope above her, silhouetted against the bright sky. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and even through her pain and delirium, Katherine thought there was something almost mythic about the way he stood there, looking down at her with what she imagined was concern. "Jesus Christ," the man breathed, and then he was scrambling down the slope, sending loose rocks skittering ahead of him. He dropped to his knees beside her, and Katherine got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong, weathered features and eyes the color of summer sky. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and several days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. He wore dusty riding clothes and a bandana around his neck, and there was a Colt revolver strapped to his hip. "Madam," he said urgently, his hands hovering over her as though he did not know where to start. "Madam, can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" "Katherine," she whispered. "Katherine Grace, from Ogden." "I'm Isaac," he said. "Isaac Ellis. I'm going to get you out of here, Katherine, I promise you that." She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that promise. The rocks were immovable and she was dying. But the certainty in his voice, the fierce determination in his eyes, made her want to believe him. Isaac stood and surveyed the rockslide with the practiced eye of someone who had worked with stone before. Katherine watched him through a haze of pain as he walked around the debris, testing the larger boulders with his hands, examining how the rocks had fallen and settled. When he came back to her side, his face was grim. "I'm not going to lie to you," he said. "This is bad, but I've moved rock before. Worked in a silver mine up in Nevada for 3 years. I know how to do this without bringing more down on top of you." "My legs," Katherine managed. "I cannot feel them anymore." Isaac's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "That might be a mercy right now. I'm going to start with the smaller rocks, work my way up to the big one. It's going to take time and I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Can you stay awake and talk to me? I will try. That's all I ask." He pulled off his leather gloves and tossed them aside, then removed his hat and set it on her chest to shade her face from the sun. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Katherine felt fresh tears sting her eyes. Isaac started with the rocks pinning her left leg, carefully removing them one by one and tossing them clear of the slide zone. Some were small enough to lift easily, but others required him to brace his legs and heave with his entire body. Sweat soon soaked through his shirt, and the muscles in his arms and back stood out in sharp relief. He worked with methodical patience, never rushing, always checking to make sure he was not destabilizing anything that might shift and crush her further. "Tell me about yourself," he said as he worked, his voice steady despite his labored breathing. "How did you end up out here alone?" Katherine tried to focus on his question rather than the fresh waves of agony that each moved stone sent through her body. "I wanted to collect wildflowers," she said haltingly. "I left early before my father was awake. He would have tried to stop me or insisted on sending someone with me. I wanted to be alone." "I understand that feeling," Isaac said, grunting as he rolled away a particularly large stone. "Sometimes a person needs solitude to think clearly." "You come from Ogden?" "No, madam. I'm just passing through. Been traveling since Nevada looking for work. Thought I might try my hand at ranching, maybe find a place that needs an extra pair of hands." He paused to wipe sweat from his face with his bandana. "Been riding through this canyon all afternoon. If I'd gone through in the morning like I planned, I never would have heard you." "Lucky for me, you are a late riser," Katherine said, attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Isaac glanced at her, and something flickered in his eyes. "Lucky for both of us, maybe." He worked on steadily as the sun continued its descent. The smaller rocks were gradually cleared away from her left leg, and Isaac examined the damage with gentle fingers. Katherine watched his face as he did so and saw the worry there. "How bad is it?" she asked. "I think it's broken," he said honestly. "But I've seen men recover from worse. Once we get you out of here, we'll get you to a doctor. Ogden's not more than 10 miles, is it?" "About that, yes." Isaac moved to the flat slab of sandstone that lay across her hips. This was more challenging, as it was both heavy and wide, and he had to find a way to lever it up without letting it slide and cause more damage. He searched around until he found a sturdy length of wood, probably a dead juniper branch, and positioned it beneath one edge of the slab. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "When I lift this, there's going to be pressure changes, but I need to get it off you." Katherine nodded, bracing herself. Isaac put his full weight on the lever, and the slab began to rise. The pain that shot through Katherine's body was indescribable, like being torn in half, and she screamed despite her determination not to. Isaac immediately eased the pressure. "I'm sorry," he said, his face stricken. "God, I'm so sorry." "Do it," Katherine gasped. "Just do it quickly." He hesitated only a moment, then threw his weight against the lever again. The slab rose, teetered, and then Isaac was shoving it aside where it crashed down several feet away. Katherine was sobbing now, unable to stop, and Isaac knelt beside her with his hand on her shoulder. "You're doing so well," he said quietly. "You're the bravest woman I've ever met. Just hold on a little longer." The sun was touching the canyon rim now, painting the red rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Isaac turned his attention to the final obstacle, the massive boulder that pinned Katherine's right leg. He circled it several times, and Katherine could see the concern growing on his face. This rock was different from the others. It was huge, easily 300 pounds, and it had settled into the ground in such a way that simple leverage would not work. "I'm going to have to dig beneath it," Isaac said, more to himself than to her. "Create a space for your leg. then see if I can shift it." He started digging with his hands, scooping away loose dirt and gravel from around the boulder's base. His fingernails broke and bled, but he did not stop. When his hands were raw, he used a flat stone as a makeshift shovel, scraping and digging with relentless determination. The light was fading fast now, the canyon filling with purple shadows. "It's getting dark," Katherine said weakly. She was so tired, so thirsty. Every part of her hurt, and the parts that did not hurt felt numb and distant, as though they no longer belonged to her body. "I know," Isaac said, "but I can't leave you here overnight. I won't. You should go get help, bring people back." By the time I reached Ogden and came back with help, it would be past midnight. "You wouldn't survive that long without water, and I'm not sure you'd survive me moving this rock alone anyway. We do this now, together, or not at all." There was such fierce conviction in his voice that Katherine felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, despite everything. This man, this stranger, was risking the failing light and his own exhaustion to save her life. He had already been working for hours, and he showed no sign of giving up. Isaac continued digging as the stars began to appear overhead. Katherine drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of the rhythmic scraping sound, of Isaac's labored breathing, of the cooling night air on her face. When she opened her eyes again, the canyon was dark except for the silvery light of a half-moon. "Still with me?" Isaac's voice came out of the darkness. "Yes," Katherine whispered. "Good. I think I've dug deep enough. I'm going to try to roll this boulder now. When I do, I need you to pull your leg free if you can. Do you understand?" "I understand." Isaac positioned himself on the far side of the boulder, bracing his back against the canyon wall and his feet against the stone. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. He pushed with everything he had, his legs straining, his whole body shaking with effort. The boulder shifted slightly, and Katherine felt the pressure on her leg change. She tried to pull free but could not. The stone settled back into place, and Isaac let out a frustrated growl. "Again," he said through gritted teeth. "We're going to do it again." He repositioned himself and pushed. This time Katherine could feel the boulder definitely moving, rolling up and away just a fraction. She pulled at her leg, ignoring the screaming pain, and felt it shift slightly in the dirt. "It's working," she gasped. "Try again." Isaac was breathing hard now, but he nodded and set himself once more. This time when he pushed, Katherine could hear him shouting with effort, a primal sound of pure determination. The boulder rolled up, and Katherine yanked her leg free just as Isaac lost his grip, and the stone crashed back down exactly where her leg had been a moment before. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Isaac was scrambling around the boulder to her side, his hands running over her legs to assess the damage. Katherine was free. After hours of being trapped, she was finally free. The relief was so overwhelming that she began to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound that turned into sobs. "Easy now," Isaac said gently. He pulled off his jacket and laid it over her, then carefully lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, and he could feel her trembling. "I've got you. You're safe now." Katherine wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. He smelled of sweat and dust, and something else. Something clean and masculine that made her feel safer than she had ever felt in her life. Isaac carried her up the slope with careful steps, mindful of the loose rock, and when they reached level ground, he set her down gently on a flat stretch of grass beneath a cottonwood tree. "I need to splint your legs before we try to move you any further," he said. "And you need water." He retrieved his canteen from his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding that waited patiently nearby, and held it to Katherine's lips. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, and it was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. "Slowly," Isaac cautioned. Not too much at once, or you'll be sick." When she had drunk her fill, Isaac set about making splints from straight branches and strips torn from his spare shirt. He worked with surprising gentleness, but Katherine still had to bite down on a leather strap he gave her to keep from screaming as he straightened her broken legs and bound them. By the time he finished, she was drenched in cold sweat and shaking uncontrollably. "I'm going to take you to Ogden now," Isaac said, wrapping her in his bedroll for extra warmth. "I'll go as easy as I can, but it's going to be a rough ride. Can you hold on to me?" "Yes," Katherine said, though she was not sure she could. She was so weak, so tired. Isaac lifted her again and mounted his horse with Katherine cradled in his arms. It was an awkward position, but he managed to arrange her so that her splinted legs were supported, and her upper body was held securely against his chest. Then he turned the horse toward Ogden and urged it into a gentle walk. The ride was agony. Every step the horse took sent jolts of pain through Katherine's broken legs, and she could not help the small whimpers that escaped her lips. Isaac held her close, one arm around her waist, the other controlling the reins, and he murmured constant reassurance. "You're doing fine. We're almost there. Just hold on." Katherine focused on the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, on the strength of his arms around her. She thought about how he had spent hours moving those rocks, how he had refused to give up even when the task seemed impossible. She thought about the determination in his eyes and the gentleness in his hands. This man had saved her life, had given everything to rescue a complete stranger. "Why did you do it?" she whispered. "Do what? Why did you work so hard to save me? You do not even know me." Isaac was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and serious. "Because I looked down and saw you trapped there, so brave and scared and fighting, and I knew I couldn't leave you. I just knew. Does that make sense?" "No," Katherine said, "but I am glad you felt that way." They rode on through the moonlit landscape. Katherine slipped in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to find they were passing through sleeping farmland, sometimes waking to see the distant lights of town. Each time she woke, Isaac's arms were still around her, steady and secure. It was nearly midnight when they reached Ogden. The town was mostly dark, but Isaac knew where to go. He rode straight to the home of Dr. Samuel Walsh, whose house was recognizable by the sign outside. Isaac dismounted carefully and carried Katherine up to the door, where he pounded with his boot until a light appeared in an upstairs window. Dr. Walsh, a gray-haired man in his nightshirt, opened the door looking irritated until he saw Katherine's condition. Then his expression shifted to professional concern. "Bring her inside quickly. Put her on the examination table." Isaac laid Katherine down on the leather-covered table in the doctor's office, and she immediately missed the warmth of his arms. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "Do not leave." "I'm not going anywhere," Isaac promised. Dr. Walsh examined Katherine's legs, asking questions about what had happened while he worked. Isaac explained about the rockslide, about the hours of digging and moving stones. The doctor listened with growing amazement. "Young man, you likely saved this woman's life. If she had been there much longer, the shock and dehydration alone could have killed her." He looked at Katherine. "You're very lucky he came along." "I know," Katherine said, her eyes finding Isaac's across the room. The doctor gave her laudanum for the pain, and Katherine felt herself drifting into a warm, painless haze. She was vaguely aware of the doctor setting her bones, of clean bandages being wrapped around her legs, of someone washing the dirt and blood from her face and hands. Through it all, Isaac stayed in the corner of the room, watching with worried eyes. "She'll need to stay off those legs for at least 6 weeks, Dr. Walsh said. "The breaks are clean, thank God, and should heal well if she's careful, but she'll need constant care." I will send for her father, Isaac said. Her name is Katherine Grace. Do you know the family, of course? Charles Grace, the banker. I'll send my boy to wake him. The doctor disappeared briefly, then returned. He'll be here shortly. Now, young man, let me look at your hands. Isaac had forgotten about his hands, but now that the doctor mentioned them, he realized they were throbbing painfully. His palms were torn and bloody, his fingernails broken, his knuckles skinned raw. Dr. Walsh cleaned and bandaged them with efficiency. You'll be sore for a few days, but you'll heal, the doctor said. You should be proud of yourself. It's not many men who would have done what you did. Before Isaac could respond, the door burst open and a tall man with silver hair rushed in. He saw Katherine on the table and went pale. Katie, my God, Katie. Father, Katherine said weakly, reaching for him. Charles Grace took his daughter's hand and pressed it to his lips, tears streaming down his face. I thought you were dead. When your horse came back without you, I thought the worst. I nearly was, Katherine said. But this man saved me. Isaac Ellis, he moved every stone. Charles turned to Isaac, and the gratitude in his eyes was overwhelming. I do not know how to thank you. Name your price, anything you want. Isaac shook his head. I do not want your money, sir. I just wanted to help. But you must let me do something. You saved my daughter's life. I'm just glad I was there, Isaac said. He looked at Katherine and their eyes met. Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them could name but both felt deeply. Where are you staying? Charles asked. Do you have lodgings? I was planning to camp outside town tonight. Nonsense, you'll stay at my house, I insist. It's the least I can do. Isaac wanted to refuse, but he was exhausted and the thought of a real bed was too tempting. Thank you, sir. That's very kind. Dr. Walsh declared that Katherine should remain under his observation for the night, so Charles made arrangements to have her moved to his home the following morning. Before Isaac left with Charles, he approached Katherine one more time. She was drowsy from the laudanum, her eyes half closed, but she smiled when she saw him. Thank you, she whispered. You saved my life. Get some rest, Isaac said gently. I'll see you tomorrow, promise. I promise. Charles Grace's home was a substantial two-story house on Ogden's Main Street, furnished with the tasteful comfort of old money. He showed Isaac to a guest room and provided him with clean clothes and hot water for a bath. Isaac scrubbed away the dirt and blood of the day, wincing as the water stung his raw hands, and when he finally lay down in the soft bed, he was asleep within minutes. He dreamed of Katherine trapped beneath the rocks, of her frightened eyes and brave voice. He dreamed of moving stones that grew heavier with each one he lifted, of digging until his hands were nothing but bone. He woke before dawn, disoriented, and it took him a moment to remember where he was. Through the window, he could see the eastern sky beginning to lighten. Isaac dressed in his own clothes, now cleaned and mended by some unseen servant, and went downstairs. He found Charles Grace already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The older man looked as though he had not slept at all. Help yourself, Charles said, gesturing to the coffee pot on the stove. Cook will be up soon to make breakfast, but I find I cannot eat. Isaac poured himself a cup and sat down. How are you holding up, sir? I keep thinking about what might have happened if you had not come along. Katie is all I have left since my wife died. I could not bear to lose her too. Charles looked at Isaac with red-rimmed eyes. Tell me, what were you doing in Red Canyon? It's not exactly on the main road. I like the scenic routes, Isaac said. I've been wandering for a while now, ever since I left the mines. Thought I'd see the country before I settled down. And now, do you have plans? Isaac hesitated. I was thinking about finding ranch work in the area. I'm good with horses, and I do not mind hard labor. Charles studied him for a long moment. I may be able to help with that. I know most of the ranchers around here and my recommendation carries weight. But first, I'd like you to stay a while, just until Katie is recovered enough that I know she'll be all right. Would you do that?" "I do not want to impose." "You would not be imposing, please. It would ease my mind to have you here." Isaac thought about Catherine's face, about the way she had smiled at him despite her pain. He thought about the strange connection he had felt when their eyes met. "All right," he said. "I'll stay." Dr. Walsh delivered Katherine home later that morning in his carriage, padded with blankets and pillows to ease the journey. Isaac watched from the porch as they carried her inside and upstairs to her bedroom, and he caught a glimpse of her pale face on the pillow. She looked so fragile, so different from the strong woman who had endured hours of agony without complaint. Over the following days, Isaac found himself settling into the Grace household. Charles had hired a nurse to care for Katherine, but Isaac visited her room often, bringing her books from Charles's library, or wildflowers from the garden, or simply sitting with her and talking. They discovered they had much in common despite their different backgrounds. Both had lost their mothers young. Both loved the wild places of the West. Both felt constrained by the expectations of others. "My father wants me to be a proper lady," Katherine said one afternoon as she lay propped up on pillows, her legs elevated. "He wants me to marry well, to host parties and have children and never venture beyond the safety of town." "But that is not what you want," Isaac said. "It was not a question." "I want to live," Katherine said fiercely. "Really live. I want to see everything, do everything. I want to ride through canyons and climb mountains and feel the wind in my face. I do not want to be trapped in a parlor for the rest of my life." Isaac smiled. "You are extraordinary, you know that," Katherine blushed. "I am foolish. I nearly died because of my recklessness." "You nearly died because of bad luck. There's a difference." Isaac reached out and took her hand, and Katherine felt her heart skip. "Do not let this change who you are. The world needs women like you." As the weeks passed and Katherine's legs slowly healed, Isaac and Katherine spent more and more time together. When she was strong enough to sit in a chair, Isaac would carry her downstairs to the parlor, ignoring her protests that she was too heavy. When she could manage crutches, he walked beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Charles watched this growing relationship with mixed feelings. He could see the way his daughter looked at Isaac, the way she came alive when he entered the room. He could see that Isaac was an honorable man, hardworking and kind. But Isaac was also a drifter, a man with no prospects and no plans. Was he really the right match for Katherine? One evening, about 5 weeks after the accident, Charles invited Isaac to join him in his study for brandy. Isaac went with some trepidation, sensing that an important conversation was coming. "I know you care for my daughter," Charles said without preamble, "and I know she cares for you. I would have to be blind not to see it. Sir, I would never presume. Let me finish." Charles swirled his brandy, staring into the amber liquid. "Katie has always been headstrong. Even as a child, she refused to do things the expected way. I have indulged her more than I should have, perhaps because I could not bear to dim that fire in her. But she is my only child, and I want her to be happy and secure." "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because I am trying to decide whether you are the man who can give her that happiness and security. You saved her life, and for that I will always be grateful. But gratitude is not a foundation for marriage. Tell me honestly, Isaac, what are your intentions toward my daughter?" Isaac met Charles's eyes steadily. "I love her," he said simply. "I think I started loving her the moment I saw her trapped under those rocks, so brave and afraid and fighting to survive. These past weeks have only deepened what I feel, but I have nothing to offer her. No money, no prospects, no future beyond whatever work I can find. I know I am not the kind of man you wanted for her." Charles was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The kind of man I wanted for Katie was someone who would love her for who she is, not try to change her into something she is not. Someone strong enough to stand beside her, not control her. Someone who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe." He looked at Isaac. "It seems to me you have already proven you are that man." Isaac felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Are you saying—" "I am saying that if Katie will have you, you have my blessing. But you will need to offer her more than a wandering life. I can help with that. I spoke to my friend Jacob Morrison. He owns a ranch about 20 miles south of here, near Huntsville. He's getting old and needs someone to help run the place. He's willing to take you on as foreman, with the possibility of buying into a partnership after a few years. It's hard work, but it's honest, and it would give you a foundation to build on." Isaac was stunned. "I do not know what to say. That's incredibly generous. Thank Katie, not me. I'm only doing this because I want my daughter to be happy, and I think you are the man who can make her happy." Charles held out his hand. "Do we have an understanding?" Isaac shook his hand firmly. "We do, sir. Thank you." Now came the hard part. Isaac had to ask Katherine if she would actually want a life with him. Despite Charles's blessing and his own feelings, he could not assume Katherine felt the same way. She might see him as nothing more than the man who rescued her, a temporary connection born of trauma. He waited until the next afternoon when Katherine was sitting in the garden, her healing legs stretched out on a cushioned bench. She was reading a book, her dark hair gleaming in the sunlight, and Isaac's heart clenched at the sight of her. He loved her so much it hurt. "Katherine," he said, sitting down beside her, "I need to talk to you about something important." She set down her book, hearing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. I have been offered a position as foreman on a ranch near Huntsville. It's a good opportunity, a chance to build something permanent." Katherine's face fell. "You are leaving." "That depends on you." Isaac took a deep breath. "Katherine Grace, I love you. I have loved you since the moment I found you in that canyon, and I will love you until the day I die. I know we have not known each other long, and I know I am not the kind of man your father probably imagined for you. But I promise you this: if you will have me, I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy. I will never try to cage you or change you. I will be your partner in everything, your equal, and if you want to ride through canyons and climb mountains, I will be right there beside you, making sure you are safe but never holding you back." Tears were streaming down Katherine's face, but she was smiling. "Isaac, wait, I am not done." Isaac took her hands in his bandaged ones. "I do not have a ring yet, but I will get one. Katherine Grace, will you marry me? Will you come to that ranch and build a life with me?" Katherine launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and nearly knocking them both off the bench. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes, I love you too. I have loved you since you carried me out of that canyon. I thought you were just being kind, that you could never care for someone like me." Isaac pulled back to look at her incredulously. "Someone like you?" "Katherine, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are brave and strong and beautiful and fierce. I am the one who cannot believe you would want me." "Then we are both fools," Katherine said, and kissed him. It was a sweet, tender kiss, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. Isaac rested his forehead against hers, hardly able to believe this was real. "I have to warn you," Katherine said. "I am not very good at cooking, and I have a terrible temper sometimes. And I will probably drive you mad with my need for adventure." "And I am stubborn," Isaac countered. "And I snore. And I will probably drive you mad with my overprotectiveness, but I think we will be good for each other anyway." "I think so too." They were married 6 weeks later, as soon as Katherine could walk without crutches. The ceremony was held in Ogden's small church, with half the town in attendance. Charles walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and when he placed her hand in Isaac's, he whispered, "Take care of my girl." "With my life," Isaac promised. The ranch near Huntsville was exactly what they had hoped for. It was a sprawling property with good grazing land, a sturdy house, and a view of the mountains that took Katherine's breath away. Jacob Morrison, the owner, was a gruff but kind man who took an immediate liking to Isaac's work ethic and Katherine's spirit. "Never thought I'd see a woman who was not afraid to get her hands dirty," Jacob said approvingly after watching Katherine help Isaac mend a fence. "You picked a good one, Ellis." "I know," Isaac said, watching his wife with pride. The work was hard, but they thrived on it. Isaac proved to be a natural horseman and rancher, and Katherine surprised everyone by taking to ranch life with enthusiasm. She learned to care for cattle, to tend chickens, to grow vegetables in the kitchen garden. She was not a natural cook, as she had warned, but she improved with practice, and Isaac ate everything she made with good humor. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, holding hands and talking about their day. Sometimes Isaac would play the harmonica he had bought in town, and Katherine would sing along in her clear, sweet voice. They were happier than either had ever imagined possible. 2 years after their marriage, Jacob Morrison's health began to fail. He called Isaac and Katherine to his bedside one winter afternoon and told them he had decided to sell them the ranch at a price they could afford, with payments spread over several years. "This place needs young people," Jacob said. "People with energy and dreams. You two have made it come alive again. I want you to have it." Isaac and Katherine accepted with gratitude and determination. They worked harder than ever, building up the herd, improving the property, making the ranch successful. Charles visited often, delighted to see his daughter so happy and fulfilled. He had been right about Isaac. The young man had proven himself 100 times over. In the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one morning as they were feeding the horses, and he was so surprised he dropped the bucket of grain he was carrying. "You are sure?" he asked, his face a mixture of joy and terror. "Dr. Walsh confirmed it yesterday," Katherine said, laughing at his expression. "We are going to have a baby, Isaac." He swept her into his arms and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully. "Should I be doing that? Are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Katherine said, but she was touched by his concern. "Though I will admit I am a little nervous. What if I am not a good mother?" "You will be an amazing mother," Isaac said firmly. "Just like you are an amazing wife and rancher and human being." Their son was born in early winter, during the first snowfall of the season. It was a difficult labor, and Isaac paced the floor downstairs while the midwife attended Katherine. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling. "You have a healthy boy, Mr. Ellis, and your wife is asking for you." Isaac took the stairs 2 at a time. Katherine lay in their bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Isaac sat beside her and looked down at his son's red, wrinkled face and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Katherine asked softly. "What about James?" Isaac suggested. "After your mother's father," Katherine smiled. "James Ellis, I like it." Little James grew strong and healthy, and the ranch prospered. They added more cattle, built new outbuildings, and hired a couple of hands to help with the work. Katherine proved to be the mother she had hoped to be, patient and loving but also firm when needed. She often took James with her as she did her chores, carrying him in a sling against her chest, and the boy grew up surrounded by love and the beauty of the land. When James was 3, Katherine became pregnant again. This time she delivered a daughter, whom they named Emma after Isaac's mother. Emma had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes, and from the moment she could walk, she followed her older brother everywhere. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The children grew, the ranch thrived, and Isaac and Katherine's love deepened with each passing season. They had their challenges, certainly. There were years when drought made things difficult, and years when harsh winters took a toll on the herd. There were the normal disagreements and frustrations of any marriage. But through it all, they faced everything together as partners. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Katherine rode back to Red Canyon. It was the first time Katherine had been there since the accident, and she felt her heart race as they approached the spot where the rockslide had occurred. The rocks had long since been cleared away by rain and wind, but she could still see where the cliff face had collapsed. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked, watching her face. "Yes," Katherine said. "I just wanted to see it again, to remember." They dismounted and stood together, looking up at the red stone walls. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you had not come along," Katherine said quietly. "If I had died there, do not think about that. But I do think about it, because it makes me realize how lucky I am. How grateful I got to live, Isaac. I got to have this beautiful life with you. Our children, our home, everything we have built together. None of it would exist if not for you and what you did that day." Isaac pulled her close. "And none of my life would exist without you. You gave me purpose, Katherine. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to build something permanent. We saved each other that day." Katherine looked up at him, this man who had moved every stone to free her, who had given her everything she had dreamed of and more. "I love you," she said. "I will always love you." "And I will always love you," Isaac replied, and kissed her there in the canyon where their story had begun. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. When they arrived home, James and Emma ran out to meet them, shouting with excitement about the baby fox they had seen near the creek. Katherine scooped up Emma while Isaac lifted James onto his shoulders, and together they went inside to the warm, welcoming house they had made together. That night, after the children were asleep, Isaac and Katherine sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Katherine rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Do you ever regret it?" Isaac asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Giving up the comfortable life you could have had in town," Katherine laughed softly. "Not for a single moment. This is the life I always wanted, Isaac. Adventure and challenge and purpose, and you, always you. I just want to make sure you are happy. I am happier than I ever imagined possible." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "You moved every stone to save my life, and I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of that gift." "You were already worthy," Isaac said. "You are the most worthy person I know." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. 20 years later, when Isaac and Katherine were in their 40s and their children had children of their own, they would still sit on this porch on warm evenings, holding hands and counting their blessings. James would take over running the ranch with his wife, while Emma would become a teacher in Ogden, carrying on her mother's independent spirit. But on this night, their 10th anniversary, they were simply a man and woman who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together out of love and hard work and determination. Isaac thought about that day in Red Canyon, about the impossible task he had faced and the woman he had discovered beneath those stones. He had known, even then, that she was someone special. He just had not known she would become his entire world. "What are you thinking about?" Katherine asked, feeling him smile in the darkness. "About how lucky I am," Isaac said. "About how a random decision to ride through a canyon changed my entire life." "It was not random," Katherine said. "It was fate. We were meant to find each other." "You really believe that?" "I do. Some things are just meant to be." Isaac pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body against his. She was right. Some things were meant to be. He had been wandering aimlessly, looking for purpose, and he had found it in the form of a trapped woman who refused to give up. She had been searching for a life worth living, and together they had created exactly that. The ranch stretched out around them in the moonlight, their home and their legacy. Inside, their children slept peacefully, safe and loved. Above them, the stars shone eternal. And between them flowed a love that had been forged in desperation and strengthened by time, a love that would endure for all the days of their lives. Isaac Ellis had moved every stone to save Katherine Grace's life that day in Red Canyon. But in doing so, he had also saved his own. They had rescued each other, and in the process, they had built something beautiful and lasting. A partnership, a family, a love story written in red rock and starlight, in hard work and tender moments, in sacrifice and joy. Years later, when they were old and gray, when their bones ached and their eyes grew dim, they would still remember that day with perfect clarity. They would remember the fear and the pain and the desperate hope. They would remember the moment when their eyes first met, when they recognized in each other a kindred spirit. And they would be grateful, every single day, for the rockslide that brought them together and the strength that kept them together. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, Isaac would raise a glass of wine and toast to his wife. "To Katherine," he would say, his voice still strong despite his years, "who gave me everything worth having, who made my life an adventure, who I would move every stone in the world for, again and again." And Katherine, her dark hair now white but her eyes still bright with life, would smile at him across the crowded room and mouth the words, "I love you." Because some things never changed. Some loves never faded. Some promises made in desperation and kept in devotion lasted forever. But that was all still to come. On this night, their 10th anniversary, they were simply Isaac and Katherine, husband and wife, partners in all things. They sat on their porch until late into the night, talking and dreaming and planning for the future. When they finally went inside to bed, they fell asleep in each other's arms, content and complete. The moon traced its path across the sky. The coyotes sang their wild songs. And in the house that love built, two people who had found each other against impossible odds rested peacefully, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. Just as they always had. Just as they always would. Because Isaac Ellis had not just moved stones that day in Red Canyon. He had moved mountains. He had done the impossible. And in return, he had received the greatest gift of all, a love that would last a lifetime and beyond, a love born of courage and compassion, a love that proved that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is refuse to give up, no matter how heavy the burden or how impossible the task. Katherine Grace had been trapped and dying, with no hope of escape. Isaac Ellis had found her and refused to leave her. Stone by stone, hour by hour, he had freed her. And in doing so, he had freed himself from a life without meaning, without purpose, without love. They had saved each other. And they would spend the rest of their lives grateful for that gift, for that miracle, for that one perfect day when fate brought them together in a canyon of red rock, and changed everything forever. The end came peacefully for both of them, many years later, when they were well into their 80s. They passed within months of each other, Isaac first, and then Katherine, as though she could not bear to be without him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the wide Utah sky they had both loved so much. Their children and grandchildren would visit the graves often, bringing flowers and telling stories about the remarkable couple who had loved so deeply and lived so fully. The story of how Isaac had saved Katherine from the Rockslide became family legend, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love and determination, and refusing to give up. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right through Red Canyon, people said you could almost hear the sound of stones being moved, one by one, and the echo of two voices laughing together in the fading light. It was just a story, of course, a romantic notion. But those who knew Isaac and Katherine, who had witnessed their love firsthand, liked to think it might be true. Because if any love was strong enough to echo through time, it was theirs. In the end, that was their legacy. Not the successful ranch or the children they raised or the money they accumulated. Their legacy was the love they shared, the example they set, the proof they provided that sometimes, against all odds, two people can find each other and build something beautiful together. All it takes is courage and compassion, and the willingness to move every stone standing in the way of what matters most. Isaac Ellis had moved every stone to save Katherine Grace's life. And she had spent the rest of her life proving that his effort was worthwhile, that she was worth saving, that their love was worth everything they had sacrificed to create it. Together, they had lived fully and loved completely, and they had left the world better than they found it. That was all anyone could hope for. That was everything,